Access to Democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Crutchfield Dermatology, a full-service treatment center and Medi-Spa in Eagan. Their goal is to help you look good and feel great with beautiful skin. With service built around courtesy, dignity, and respect, Mayo-trained Dr. Charles Crutchfield personally treats each patient and is acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians. Truestone Financial, with locations in Minnesota and Wisconsin, has proudly served its members since 1939. Truestone engages, educates, and supports its members to ensure they have the tools to empower their financial well-being. Truestone Financial, your neighborhood credit union. Learn more at truestone.org. Edina Eye Physicians and Surgeons, a division of Twin Cities Eye Consultants, has proudly served the Twin Cities for more than 55 years now in 7 convenient locations. Using the most advanced technology combined with human touch, Edina Eye offers comprehensive services and dedicated specialists committed to excellence with innovative procedures and expertise for the most advanced eye care.
Welcome to Access to Democracy. Alan Miller with you, and we have a first-time guest, a gentleman who is the CEO of a very unique company, or I should say companies. Welcome, Kent Lee of East View Companies, and maybe you can tell us what East View Companies means.
All right. Alan, thank you. Thank you for inviting me here today. East View Companies, we came up with this name about 34 years ago when we set up the companies in New York City. We were trying to come up with something that captured the products that we were imagining that we would produce and distribute to customers at the time. And those products were primarily formerly classified or difficult to acquire publications that were coming out of the soon-to-be ex-Soviet Union, and everything was coming from either Russia or Ukraine or a country in the East. There was, since I was in grad school at the time in New York, I was very familiar with a well-known Western publisher that was called Westview, and I was a little concerned that we would be maybe illegally appropriating the name, but I had a law student, Columbia Law School colleague who helped advise us in the early years. He said, "Don't worry about that. We'll call it Eastview works." And so Eastview it was. It didn't end up with another name that I think would not have stood time. Eastview has been very a generous, open concept for us as we've expanded into China or East Asia more largely, or the Middle East. So Eastview works.
Now you say we, so I take it somebody who was back there way back when who started this up with you.
Yeah, the co-founder is a gentleman, Vladimir Frangulov, Dima Frangulov, a deep and dear friend of mine, and we've been working side by side through all these years.
Now your offices are here in Minnesota.
Yes, yes. Not originally. We started out in an apartment in New York City and in Dima's apartment in Moscow, and then I had moved back with my first wife to Minneapolis to be in the area where I actually grew up, and Dima wanted to leave the Soviet Union with his family. He wanted to emigrate, and he ended up coming to Minnesota, and we began to then work from an office, a small office, out in Plymouth, and that was the kind of the Minnesota origins of the companies. We maintained a Moscow office after Dima left, with one of his former coworkers heading that up, and the company kind of grew from there.
And today you're in 7 or 8 different countries.
Yeah. So it's been a great and I think sustainable story. Apart from the headquarter operations here in Minnesota, there are very fundamental offices in both Moscow and in Kiev, so Russia and Ukraine. We've got representatives in all of the former Soviet countries who would gather materials and send them to us, but then China is important to us. Now we have somebody who works for us from Bogota, Colombia, and so that helps us with a lot of Latin American relationships. And then also in Australia, and then in Germany, we work the European market directly from Germany.
So if I pick up the phone and I call East View, what am I calling for? What do I want?
Well, I guess it could be a number of things, but I guess broadly speaking, there are professional foreign language publications that are of interest to researchers and analysts. They could be of foreign language newspapers, foreign language journals, foreign language books. The foreign languages are first of all Russian and Chinese, but many other, dozens of other languages actually. And so we've expanded to fill the void that exists in how can one easily, from the point of view of a large institution, a library, for example, the University of Minnesota, or libraries of all sizes in many countries, how can we easily get, if we need, these exotic language publications? So that's what we do, and in addition to those other publication types, then we also supply a lot of maps and the digital or geospatial versions of those maps in a variety of formats.
Well, I saw one warehouse, and when you say a lot of maps, that's an understatement, because I have never seen so many maps. And if I said, I want a map of Bogota, Colombia, it would be right there.
Yes.
And by way of disclosure, I have to say that my son is with East View, and
we're real happy that Peter is here. So,
and
he works in the company that we call East View MapLink, and that is largely a warehouse operation where we do have hundreds of thousands of maps there that are then distributed to customers. In the case of that company, primarily in the United States. But these are a lot of trade maps, popular maps, tourist maps. Many of the more scientific maps, which are actually even more numerous, they're so numerous that these days we can only keep them in digital forms. And those may be more appropriate for research or other professional
And a lot
audiences.
of researchers rely on East View companies for that information.
I think so.
Now, if I'm a fisherman and I want to make sure that I don't go aground someplace, would I go to East View, and would there be a map available that would show me where I can, and I'm not a fisherman, so.
Yeah, with the fishing maps, that's a special line of the East View MapLink company, and while it is not dealing with the lakes of China or Ukraine or Russia or conflict areas, it is very comprehensive for the lakes of Minnesota and the Midwest and many other recreational areas in the United States.
I would think the United States government would be very interested in maps of this sort.
Well, the fishing maps maybe not. Maybe when government officials are going on vacation, I hope they would use our maps. But when they're at work, then very much they are interested in our maps of many important countries and conflicts around the world.
And I guess a lot of that stuff is classified in
Well,
some respects.
we specialize in identifying, finding, acquiring, supplying, sometimes adding value or modifying authoritative maps that come from local governments all over the world, and so Russian maps from Russia, Chinese maps from China, Botswanan maps from Botswana, and maps as a type of publication are definitely in an interesting category of, sometimes depending on the country, sometimes depending on the government that's in power, they're restricted, and of course there's been a big evolution in general moving towards more openness with maps. But when we started out, many of the maps that we deal in now were just becoming declassified and had been declassified forever.
My wife Sharon loves maps. She does not like to go online to look at anything. She wants to have the map and have it in her hands and be able to follow the route or whatever it happens to be. And how, at the present time, are you dealing with Russia and Ukraine? Because you have offices in each country.
It's a really a good and complicated question here. First of all, it's not, for 33 years it's never been boring or slow or without controversy or important things going on. Obviously, since the 24th of February of this year, then we have a war going on, and and thousands of people being killed. So, I mean, how that part affected us? Within hours, people had to leave their homes in Kiev on the 24th of February. A mass exodus of people, and including many people in our office. Although some people stayed behind and were able to actually work from their apartments. Now, they've since come back, but obviously the war is going on. In Moscow, then it's a different type of a situation here, and so there's a very careful environment of what you can say, certainly publicly. It's affected many of our information partners, and I mean it continues, and it's dynamic. So
well, you can say it. It's just you might end up in the gulag when you say
it.
Yeah.
There's no tolerance as there has been, and in the past, and in general, the free press has shut down. That doesn't make our publications irrelevant. The name of our name of our company is kind of our mission, and so the East View, even if it is a view that if it's Vladimir Putin's view, and it's not a very popular view outside of his circles, even the publications that come out under Putin's Russia are critical for researchers to know what openly people are publishing and talking about. And
that still is important, war or no war.
Absolutely. I mean, before I got into business, I was interested. I've been interested in undergrad, or certainly in grad school, in public policy, and I've always felt, even before I was a business person, that public policy should be evidence-based and not ideology-based, and using the business to get the best evidence, the best source materials that policymakers could then go through and sift for insights and conclusions and recommendations. I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to help. I wanted to help shovel as much high quality source materials into their direction that they could consume and use.
Now, this must require a lot of storage.
Well, from an IT point of view, we're in the petabyte range, so that's beyond terabytes. So it's quite a data center issue. I'm a bit old school, and I still feel that paper is tremendously valuable in many ways, not just in terms of using it, but
I'm so
storage.
old school that I believe papyrus is where it's at.
Well, it stood the test of time. It stood the test of time. So there aren't any hard drives from ancient Egypt here that have made it this far. So, but yeah, we need warehouses to store millions of pages of newspapers because we have preservation activities and we hold on to other people's materials, so the business has developed to really not be any kind of a one-trick pony. We're many tricks in our herd of ponies, as it were.
I read someplace that in some of your materials that there are 14 languages that can be spoken by representatives of East View. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think it probably would even be more than that. But it's but you know, we can't do our work without people knowing what they're dealing with. So that helps us identify publications of interest. It helps us obviously work with the publishers. It's always been critical for us to work with suppliers as we moved from a distribution model to a publishing model. Then that involves rights and negotiations. You can't just go to the bazaar and just buy something and sell it and have a sustainable business. Getting involved in aggregation and digitization required then not just the possession of the materials, but also the consent and the active support of the owners of these materials, and whether they're in Liberia or in Russia or China, and so that's been a huge part of what we do. And we need to speak and deal in many different languages.
It's certainly very complex. Now, a company like Amazon, is that a competitor or is that a customer?
Well, Amazon in some ways probably is a competitor to everybody in business. Depending on the company, in the case of East View MapLink, it's an essential partner. A large percentage of the maps that you saw in the warehouse you visited every day are sent to Amazon fulfillment centers, if not directly to customers.
And what about something like online, like Wikipedia? Does that factor into your business at all?
Probably Wikipedia not, other than people. I've only read Wikipedia. I've never actually tried to modify any entries in Wikipedia, but hopefully the people who are modifying Wikipedia are doing it with a good knowledge base. And in many cases, the information resources that we're supplying to analysts might supplement the knowledge that they have that they're sharing with others on Wikipedia.
Now, you brought us some photos of some things that East View is involved in. So I'm going to ask the control room if we can throw those up and you can tell those.
Okay.
Okay, they're starting right there.
So this is from the East View Geospatial company, and that's an example of a a building, a 3D urban model that, to be honest, I don't know whether we built this or whether we acquired the data and then further redistributed. We do both.
Okay, next.
An example of satellite imagery, high resolution imagery. So that's getting to be pretty common. There's lots of companies with lots of eyes in the sky these days. And here we have an example of what's probably a topographic map or a fraction of a topographic map, and again, they exist over all countries, all portions of the planet. If I would just linger briefly on topographic maps, and the beginning of East View Geospatial about 25 years ago, we used to say that every place on the planet there were kind of three ways that we can tell you topographically what it's about. There was the US military picture, there was the Soviet military picture, and there was the local picture. So that would be true for well, just about any place. So even Minneapolis.
There's the Minnesota picture, which is just a flat map.
Yeah, we have we have on the wall in I think expanded to about 20 feet by 10 feet, a picture of the Soviet military map of Minneapolis. It's
oh, is that right?
Yeah, it's a pretty well made map. It's a little dated, but they would have judged the effectiveness of their hydrogen bombs on us.
Can we go back to the one that we just, that one, population and thermic?
Yeah, population thematic data. So both companies are heavily involved in this. We have an effort to digitize all the world's population censuses and make them available both as the ebook versions of the tabular volumes that show the results, and then a GIS, geospatial information system approach that allows people to do computer-based work and modeling and discover details about population this way. That's just another satellite imagery picture, in this case of a port, maybe with some military things going on. And that's just an example of a nautical chart showing different zones. It could be aircraft military training zones.
Would that also show depth of the ocean?
With the aeronautical charts, they tend not to focus on the depth of the ocean, but rather maybe administrative or other navigational zones that are in the air that are of relevance when you're flying at different altitudes. And 3D models have been very important in the development of our company, and even gave a lot of impetus to our early involvement with Soviet topographic maps. We would digitize them and make a 3D model of mountains or hills, and that helped a lot of cell phone network engineers back in the day in African countries or places where the maps weren't as developed, and they could put their antennas in optimal locations to avoid dead zones and so on.
So that was their towers, in other words.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, even with 5G today, the terrain and building environment matters tremendously. This is just a case where we've mosaicked numerous topographic maps together over the territory of the United States, and we do this over all countries of the world with all types of maps. So you can have a single digital picture of maybe a series of thousands of maps, and you don't have to look at each one individually. You can see them all together.
That's fascinating. I really thank you for making all that available to us.
Well,
so When you say that you are open source information company, that would be very difficult for anybody else to really compete with, in my estimation, because you have so many tentacles that reach out into different areas here. It makes your business quite unique.
Well, it's been sustained by, I think, our early success in having a combination of both academic customers who gave you the benefit of a business model that was pretty annual, you got to sell people subscriptions, and they usually would renew, and so it becomes kind of a predictable, reliable business. And then there's government and corporate customers who come in, and they can sometimes be quite large and quite interesting, but they're not necessarily reliable. So, if we would have focused just on one or the other, I think we would have had a different growth experience. Maybe we wouldn't have grown as we have here. So
hard for me to believe that government might not be that reliable.
Well, you know, they have budget shutdowns in some countries, and that's been that's sometimes a factor in any supplier's life.
Well, we've pretty much run through our time. Is there anything else that you would like to add about East View in the time that we have left?
This is a local program, and we are very eager to have people who are interested in having a global experience work for us. And if you have an interest in languages and interest in materials that are off the beaten path, we may be the company for you. So,
in other words, East View is hiring.
East View is hiring. We have always been hiring. It's the last 3 years for us have been actually remarkable growth years, and very much so. So please reach out and check us out if you have any interest of this kind.
We've been talking with Kent Lee, who's the CEO of East View Companies, and you've had a smattering of what they do, which is kind of overwhelming, and it's very unique and very fortunate for us to have you headquartered here in Minnesota. And I'd like to thank you for coming in and spending the time with us and the explanation with us, and who knows, maybe we'll get you some new employees out of this.
Well, Alan, thank you for having me here. It's been a joy, and I'm so glad. I hope we can be of assistance to you and your audience here. So thanks very much. Here. Thanks very much.